Amazing. So, guys, we've got an awesome guest on the podcast today. We've got Abi Hookway, and I'm really excited to get this conversation going and find out a lot more, just like I'm sure you guys are. So, if you can start off by introducing yourself, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so my name's Abi Hookway. I'm a property entrepreneur, wealth coach, and I went from zero to a £7 million portfolio in less than 6 years.
Blimey. Okay. So, how did that even start? I mean, just for people that are listening, from a background perspective, did you have money before that that helped you with that investment? No, it didn't. Okay. I think
Oh.
that's how did you even get started then in that space?
So my want to change my life came when I divorced my husband. So I was just living a normal life like everybody does, married, going to work, had two little children under five. And I was looking at my future and I was thinking, my gosh, is this all my life's going to be? The same thing year after year, paying into my pension, paying off my mortgage. How can I live? How can I, do and live a massive life? So my marriage at the time was failing anyway. So I left my husband, moved into a little two-bed terraced rented house with my two kids. And I was in a lot of debt, in 24 grand's worth of debt. And I was like, how on earth am I going to look after my kids, pay for
Wow.
everything, and be able to, pay off this debt and live? And I knew I couldn't do it working a job. I knew something needed to change. So late one night, I was just sat in bed as you do, and I was scrolling the internet, and I came across this article from a guy called Paul Smith that runs Touchstone Education, and he was talking about the fact that you could use other people's money for property. Well, I was
Right.
in debt, wasn't even living in my own house, and I was like, my God, so I could go and use other people's money. And literally that day, everything changed. I went to meet Paul, managed to get a job working for him because I wanted to learn from him. And he taught me about property and how to do property, and it all went from there.
So I suppose on that, I'm very interested in that side of things because I've heard so many people say that, and so I don't, I'm not directly, I've got a fair few buy to let, with my own money that I put down initially and so on and so forth. And I also am involved in commercial bridging loans as well, and I find those very interesting. But I always get a bit like, when someone says they're using other people's money, as in, I sit there and I think about the conversation, for example, not being obviously rude or anything like that, but in that situation where you have no money yourself and you're in that situation where you want to get involved in property and then you're trying to convince someone else to give them your money to do that. What in the right mind is that person doing that for? If you think about it logically, you're
Yeah,
giving
it's
someone else money
crazy.
that doesn't have any experience, and I suppose assuming giving them some sort of slice of that profit that they're going to say that they're producing.
Most people have got the same problem. They've got a lot of money in the bank and they don't know what to do with it first to start off with. So
Okay.
my first investor was my dentist. So he's running a dental practice, making a lot of money. While I'm on my teeth and I'm going, get some no. But his problem was he knew that inflation was eating down his savings, but he was busy. His wife had a new baby. He didn't know what to do with this money. I mean, stocks and shares to a lot of people are scary, and you lose 100% of what you put in. Crypto, people think is scary again, but property people know. So what I did with my dentist was I took a lump sum from him for 12 months. It was secured on the property. So he had, like mortgage bank grade lending security on the money that he lent me. And I paid it back in 12 months with 10% interest. He was happy because his money was making 10% a year. And he was also happy that he was helping me create something because he could see my vision and what I wanted to do for tenants and things.
So I suppose ultimately it was sort of like a bridging loan, and it was
Yeah.
security against, yeah. So I do that, but I do I do it with like large developers. What was you using that money for? What did you buy? Did you buy a
Um,
flat, or what did you do?
no, just bought a little, it was a little two-bed house. I refurbed it. It was worth a lot more. I then put a mortgage on it, paid him back his money. I keep the asset that then starts giving me passive income.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. So, well, fair play to you. Did you refurb it yourself, or did you get builders in to do that?
I have never DIY'd or anything in my life. I'm not that person. So I had to find a house where there was enough in it that I could afford the builder to project manage it and do all the rip out and things. So yeah.
Wow. And so that's where it all started then.
Yeah.
Do you carry on doing that, or did you then go, right now I'm getting enough residual income from this to go and produce this myself, or do you carry on raising funds from other people?
I do a mixture of both nowadays. I use my own money and I continue to raise funds because the deals that I do nowadays, I've gone from like doing a little £100,000 house in Yorkshire, and now I do big £1 million property deals. So it depends what I'm doing, but I still like using other people's money because I see it as a win-win. I get to help them with their problem and they get to help me. And because of that, they get to come and visit the properties that I'm doing or come on site. I'm buying a big piece of land at the moment, so they'll be able to be involved, and I can show them what I'm doing. So I started doing that. Then I started flipping property and making 50 grand every time I flipped something. And then I also had a portfolio of what we call rent to rent properties. So I rented properties from landlords for 5 years and I'd put them out as holiday lets in like the Peak District and Lake District. So I've had some of those. So I've done quite a bit in property to build where I am.
I see, because for someone like myself, I love investments, but that space to me, I just find it completely wild. I do. I find it so. Why did those people, for example, in the Peak in the like Lake District, for example, why would they go, right, I want to get a tenant in here. You're going, I'm willing to pay the rent, but I now want to do this as Airbnb. It makes me wonder, like, why can't people just do it themselves?
It's because only 4% of the UK population are landlords. Out of that 4%, only 1% are educated portfolio big landlords. So you're dealing with most of the UK are landlords are accidental. They've inherited houses, they've done it by accident, or they just bought one for their pension. They don't actually know what they're doing. So a lot of the time they get into trouble, they try and manage their own tenants, they don't get professional help. So it leads them. So the landlords I had in the Lake Districts, tenants had messed them around, taken them a year to get the tenant out in court. I rock along and say, look, it's a commercial lease agreement you're going to do with me, like FRI. I'm going to look after everything. Give me your property. You get guaranteed rent for 5 years, no voids, no arrears. It just makes sense to them because they're not trained or educated to do property well. But it's funny you're saying that you think property is a bit wild. I feel the same about trading because I don't know, I'm not educated. I don't know anything about it. So for me, I'm like, oh my God, can't trade.
I don't mean as in like properties wild. Like I fully like property from my, but I just think like you see a lot of I won't name people, but you see a lot of dodgy sales courses and tactics for going out and doing this whole that you can do this. It's really easy to go and do a rent to rent. You just look at the rentals that are available. You phone them up and say, I want to do this. And they will say yes. But there must be a huge amount of rejection from a rent to rent perspective before you even get there. I mean, how long did it actually take you on the phone, of going around phoning those people to say that they would be interested? Did it take long or not?
Well, I'm trained how to do it. So it took me 2 weeks to get a yes. But it's a numbers game. It's a bit like dating. So you don't take the first one. You just have to date a few until you find one. That's the same with property. I had to go through a few landlords until one said, yes, I'll take you.
Now, I suppose in this current environment that we're in right now, is that making it easier for these sort of deals to come about because people are panicking about having tenants, or is it making it harder because they, at this moment in time, there's a bit of a rental boom, isn't there? Because people aren't buying new properties with all the high interest rates. Are you seeing that aspect sort of flow over into this whole rent to rent space?
It's hitting both sides in the buy-in space and the rent-to-rent space, because right now the population are very fearful. They think a property crash is on the horizon, which is so not true. In the UK, we have not enough houses. The government's not building enough houses. The private sector's trying to build, but it's going to take us 50 years of building 350,000 homes a year to get anywhere near. And at the minute, we're building about 150,000 a year. So it's causing this huge issue. And then the fear is compounding it. So right now, I am getting the best property deals I've ever had to buy. And I am getting more landlords than ever ring me, wanting me to take their property. And coupled with that, we then have 14 tenants for every one available buy-to-let property, because a lot of tied landlords are exiting out of the market because of the anti-landlord taxes.
Yeah.
So right now, if you want to be a property investor, it is hands down the best time to do it.
Yeah, I suppose it from being a land. So I suppose from your perspective, why do you find it interesting to become a landlord? Because like you said, there's landlord taxes now. Tenants are getting more and more rights. And I'm pretty sure, obviously I'm a landlord myself, but mine are new properties, but isn't there something to do with like you got to upgrade all the energy efficiencies at the moment or something along those lines as well?
Yeah, that's coming. Yeah, so there's a lot of legislation around it. The thing is, if you do it properly and you do it right, so I invest in limited companies, so anti-landlord taxes don't hit me because I'm a professional limited company.
Okay.
I do the right tenants, and I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I can genuinely say only one of my tenants caused a problem, and that's because my letting agent cut corners and didn't reference them properly, so they did a grow house in one of my little rent. But my other tenants that were done right, they've been a dream, and I want to help solve the UK housing crisis. I want to be part of that solution. When I was on my knees divorced, the lady that took a chance, because I had defaults, I had debt, but the lady took a chance and let me be her tenant. So I've seen it from the other side. So I really want to help. And there's not bad tenants. There's like less than 1% of bad tenants. It's just that's all you hear, the big stories, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
If you do it right, it's profitable. It's very profitable, and it's a win-win for everybody involved.
So to get to the position that you're at now, would you say that you're highly leveraged?
Yes, but I believe in debt. I'm going to go to my grave probably owing billions of pounds worth of mortgages. And that doesn't concern me because property doubles every 10 years and we're not building enough houses. It will continue. And that's why the banks are now buying property. That's why John Lewis, as part of their business plan for next year, has said, we're going to get a load of property. These people aren't silly. So for me, it doesn't matter how leveraged I are, what mortgage I've got, because the property market is one of the safest places you can put your money, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I suppose from like a risk perspective, how are you how do you diversify your risk with this? I'm just trying to sit here and think, what kind of tips can we give people that are listening to this, that are going, do you know what, this sounds super motivating? I suppose probably quite a lot of people are probably saying, how did you convince your dentist? And was that the first person that you went to?
No, so I spoke to quite a few people. It took me about 2-3 months, but when I perfected what I was doing, once I got my professional investors pack, once my solicitor was on board, my dentist just knew me. I'd been going for my teeth. He did my kids' teeth. I weren't this somebody brand new that was just going to rip him off. And he saw what I was doing with the rent to rents and the holiday lets in the peaks. And, and he went with his wife and stayed in one. And he was like, I really see your vision. And it was easy to get, for him to invest in me. But for people that most people are worried about mortgages because we've been told mortgages are bad, which is the wrong advice. Mortgages are good. It's good debt and it's secured on an asset that goes up in value. What most people do is pay off the mortgage, pay into the pension, work 50, 60 years of their life, retire in poverty. What I teach people is not to do that, is mortgage your house, get all the money out of it, go and buy assets that are doubling in value, get that passive income in, because I retired at 36. I know you retired a lot younger than me, but for me, that was a really, 36 was brilliant, like marvelous from where I'd come from in debt. But that's what I teach people to do, just to change the way the system makes you think about finances.
I find it interesting. Yeah, I find it a very interesting space. So, for example, now though, do you feel that, well, I don't know, how can I ask how many buy-to-lets you have or things like that?
I don't actually know the number. I just, because I measure GDV. So I'm at about 7 million now. I've got about 4 million of off-plan property going to complete next year with developers because I buy a lot of off-plan. I've got some pieces of land I'm buying. I must have maybe 20, 30 buy-to-lets. You see, because I've got it all outsourced because I don't want to work in my business.
Yeah.
But for people to, I've got multiple streams. So not only have I got buy-to-lets, I've got holiday lets, I've got commercial property, which is massive and very, very good because tenants go into commercials for 15 years and pay everything. Then I'm doing a lot of land stuff. I work with developers and do off-plan. So if one part of the market goes or suddenly holiday lets were all outlawed by the government, say, you've got all the other income streams coming in. And the great news about property is if it don't work, you sell it, you make money. Property prices are still going up.
Do you, But surely, obviously, your properties, properties have gone down probably what 10% in the last year or so of the interest rates that have gone into effect. You don't
No,
think?
show government data, house prices are up 0.2% year on year. Property market has not crashed and has not gone down. Nationwide put out yesterday that the way they measure it, house prices are up 0.9%.
Okay, so, but obviously off of the peak though, that what I'm talking about. Obviously, year on year is different, but obviously, well, I was looking at one of my properties was up. It was done like 20% in like the space of 2 years during the peak, and now it's obviously come back off of that. Do you measure that side from a risk? I mean, as in, are you fixed? Are you variable on your mortgages, on your debt, or are you?
It depends what I'm doing and what deals are out there. A lot of mine I like to fix for 5 years because all the fees every time you remortgage, it's just a pain. Then every 5 years, I'll go and remortgage it to the hilt and pull even more money out and do like portfolio mortgages. But it depends what you're doing, really. But over the last 150 years, since property's been measured, it's gone up by 985%. Property doubles every 10 years. So you have these this year is a correction. They're correcting, even though the interest rates are high, property hasn't crashed. It's just correcting maybe slightly, but property is still up. But over the next 5 years, what Shelter and JPMG are predicting is that property is going to go, the average property price is going to go up to 900,000. And right now it's just under 300,000. So if all you did was go today and buy two properties and sat on them for 10 years, it's going to massively go up in value. And the reason it does that is because this huge housing shortage that we've got going on.
When you put it like that, I suppose it puts it into perspective. And I think so. You're ultimately, when you're buying these properties, you're trying to put the minimum amount that you can into the property from a mortgage perspective. Are you doing 25% down payments? Are you? I assume.
No, because I buy them cash. So I buy them cash, refurb them, put the mortgage on, and pull out all the cash. So I don't leave money in houses.
Okay, fine. So you have to leave. I suppose you're leaving the equity into it, aren't you?
I've created the equity and value. It's not my physical cash, you see.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. That's a very interesting approach. So you had to get to that point though to have the cash in order to buy completely out to then be able to do.
Unless you've got dentists that lend you money to have the cash. Everyone's going to go to their dentist now and go, "Can you be my
Isn't that insane? So why do you think there's so much sort of failure from this side of things? Because obviously I hear it all the time of like, oh, it's not as easy as all these people keep saying. I try to do rent to rent. I'm trying to convince other people to give me money to go and do a refurb. Like surely for example, I would say that my offices were, we own them on freehold and it's commercial and obviously I'm the tenant. So it's a good thing from my office perspective. And to be honest with you, the value's gone up massively and it's doing really well. We're doing capital repayments and arguably every single year that I own that building, I'm getting sort of 60k additional equity in the property. And obviously property appreciation eventually in commercial, I've got to admit it's been a little bit slower from that perspective, but obviously the yields of the equity is great. Now, for someone that's like looking to venture into this, again, I suppose, why do you think there is so much failure from that perspective? Do you think it's like, you need to have that initial business acumen to be able to go and do this, and every sort of Dick and Harry is trying to do this, and it's just they don't have that sort of confidence? Because when you do a refurb, depending on your builder, right, that builder could either completely take the mick and overprice you, and ultimately you're getting sort of skimped out on your margins anyway. Have you experienced that yourself through doing this?
No, because I'm educated. I understand what contract to use my builder, phase payment, how a schedule of works works. I understand the basics I'm not like, I don't do it myself, but I understand it. Most people go into property, they watch a few YouTubes. I get it. They watch my YouTube, they watch my TikTok and think they can do it themselves. What they don't see is behind the scenes is there's a lot of knowledge that you need. For me to prepare to go and do, for example, right now I'm doing a 200k refurb down the road. For that 200k refurb, that's a lot of preparation. That's free builders, quoting, doing a full quote. That's my architect involved. I've got a clerk of works going. It's a big thing. And like for rent to rent, it's a big thing. Getting your pitch right, understanding what property you want, doing all your due diligence. People cut corners and they don't get the right education. And like with anything, I think you need the right education, the right knowledge, and somebody that's done it before you. You need a mentor, a coach that can guide you, and then you will succeed. Most people, though, struggle because it's a fear and doubt, and because they've been trained that property is a scam, property market's going to crash. The papers are telling them it's scary. So most people even stop before they even start. But it's like you wouldn't do brain surgery without being trained as a brain surgeon. Why on earth do you think you can do property without being trained? And I knew enough back when I started, because I'd been in the corporate world for a long time, that I needed the knowledge, that I couldn't do this. I couldn't understand what I was doing without the knowledge. So that's where it comes down to for me.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. And I suppose from your perspective of experience of what you've gone through, all these different things, do you have in your mind like a set sort of margin based off of what the property value is, of what you won't basically move ahead with that project if you don't see X percentage margin from the refurb and then the revaluation? Do you have anything like that you work off, like rule of thumb?
It's 25% profit. So if I'm doing a big commercial conversion, if I'm buying commercial property, if I'm buying a buy to let or a holiday let, I want to make 25% profit in the actual property. And then it's got to cash flow at 30-40% profit as well. So that's the kind of things that I'm working towards.
When you say it's got a cash flow at 30-40% profit, what do you mean by that?
So for example, my holiday let in the Lake District, that cash flows, that's 60% profit from turnover basically. So, and that makes about 96 grand a year net profit. But I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't making that much profit, if I knew the nightly rates or the amount I needed to pay to housekeepers was going to cause the deal to come down.
Interesting. I think it's fascinating. It's nice to see so much information, I suppose, for the listeners about the property. We are obviously, heavily involved in the markets and that side, but from a property perspective, it's something that I've done myself, but it's not something that I really talk about that much. Yeah. And I would say that mine is a lot more basic than yours. Mine is, buy a property, rent it out, and put on capital repayment. I get the equity appreciation, and the rental yield gives me a little bit in my back pocket, whilst the property valuation is still going higher. And yeah, I'm accruing equity. So you do yours different, right? You basically don't allow for the equity to accrue in the property, and you constantly are trying to pull that out as much as you can.
Yeah, and I don't do capital repayments. Obviously, on my own house, I have to. And the odd commercial mortgage, you're forced to do capital repayments. But I do interest only because what's the point if the property is going to double in 10 years, me paying it down? I might as well take all the profit out as I can so that I can build. There might be a point where I get to my 60s and I decide I'm going to sell some off, pay off all the mortgages. But right now, my goal is to build and to build big.
Yeah, so you're using that through, like, I would say, like, in your growth phase, you're basically saying, right, the more capital I can take, the more I can put into another property. Next, I could do that, and then I get my passive income from that perspective, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm working on a project at the moment in the property space, where we're looking at a buy to let, but the tenant is Travelodge. And so they've got like a 20-year lease agreement on it. And so it's very strong in that perspective. Yeah. So very, very similar. But I think, do you want to try to demystify it from your perspective? You said you've gone from 0 to 7 million in 6 years. Now, is that 0 to 7 million of cash in your bank, or is that 0 to 7 million in property valuation that you've accrued and built up?
Yeah, that's just GDV. So that's just my portfolio, 0 to 7 million. My portfolio gives me £350,000 passive income a year. And that's what I say to my students. If I just stop working tomorrow, or if I decide I just want to watch Netflix or go and have cocktails on the beach somewhere, I can, because 350,000 comes to my bank whether I work or not, because my portfolio works for me.
Yeah. No, that's very impressive and very transparent as well. I don't think you get those answers from a lot of people. No, it's awesome. I mean,
I'll tell you what I'm doing. I've got no, this is the thing, because I've been skin. I've now, built my wealth. My mission in life is to help as many people. So if me being transparent helps people to wake up and actually see what they can do, I would love that.
yeah, no, I think it's amazing. And from the property perspective that you're doing, are you working still quite far up north, are you? Do you have areas of interest that you focus on?
Yeah, so right now I'm still in the Yorkshire area. I've got some property, obviously lakes, peaks, Yorkshire. I've looked at a few things in London, but with London property prices, and it's just not a good investment. I'm doing more commercial property, and that's more, all over the place, because commercial you can, when you've got like, travel lodging there for 20 years, you don't really need to do anything, just buy it. But I do focus up north because I think there's a lot of potential in big northern capitals like Manchester, Birmingham, and what's happening with them. A lot more for your money than what you get down south.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love Yorkshire. I've got family in Yorkshire. No, I've got family in North Allerton, and I've got quite a few friends in Harrogate as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a nice little spot, Harrogate. Nice little restaurants there as well, isn't it?
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I suppose as well that's obviously helped, would you say, in your starting because obviously property prices up north are a lot cheaper than down here. Would you say that where did you acquire your knowledge to go, this property in the Peak District is going to be perfect for turning into a rental, for example?
I did the full academy with Touchstone Education. So I did all their courses. I had, multimillionaire mentors around me all the time that helped me do this. I had to pay for it. I had to find the money. So I got a little bit more in debt, which people say, oh my God, you're a single mum on your own, already in debt with a crap credit rate. And then you went more in debt. But you've got to take these chances. And when you get your wake up call, and I was looking at my two children that were under 5, and I thought, if I don't do this, I'm going to let them down. So I might as well give it all. And if I go bankrupt, I go bankrupt. But at least I'm going bankrupt trying instead of just failing in life.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing when you put it like that. Very transparent. Okay, so I suppose what on earth are you working on now? So you got to this stage now. Why do you carry on? So why, if you're happy with what you're earning, why do you carry on? Why do you carry on? Why don't you go do more holidays? Why don't you spend more time with your kids and family and stuff like that and go away?
I do. I do go on a lot of holidays and I do spend a lot of time with my kids. The thing is that in life, everybody needs a purpose. So I have a life mentor coach who helps me. And I was feeling like probably 2 years ago, as I was getting this success, feeling, what if I just stopped? But that's boring, and nobody wants to just stop in life. I'm only 37. Why do I want to stop? And then I figured out that I love getting people excited. I love seeing people smash it in the property world. That's my passion. So if I can continue and I can train as many people as possible to take control of their finances, get them out of debt, get them building for their future, help solve some of the issues we're going to have with people going into retirement in poverty. If I can do that, wouldn't that be a life worth living? That'll get me out of bed every morning. So that's why I continue to do. Now, I'm not a saint. I don't work a lot of days. I maybe work 8 days a month, and then I'm messing around doing whatever I'm doing with hair and stuff. But yeah, my life's mission is to help as many people as possible. And I think when you understand that, it's a huge thing for your life and your fulfillment and peace.
So suppose I'm just trying to think of what can be some takeaway steps that listeners can do. So if you was to start all over again, then let's say if you was to start from scratch, for everything you've learned, would you have gone to your dentist and done the exact same approach from the starting ground, or would you have looked to have done something different or anything along those lines?
No, I'd have done the same. And for anyone wanting to start, what I would say is get educated. There's amazing property books out there. There's loads of stuff on the internet. Go and get educated and just take that step.
What sort of top books would you say for the people to read?
Um, So you've got your Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, incredible book. Yes, he's not just property, he talks about everything, but he can set the foundation for your whole life and why staying in the system isn't right, what 99% of people do. I've written a few books about flipping property, rent to rent books as well. You can get my books, but there's so many good trainers and teachers out there. Obviously stay away from people that are a bit scammy, but yeah, just any property books just to get yourself started.
Okay, so property books get started, and you would literally do exactly the same thing. You would go back to. Do you not think though that your dentist believed in your vision because you went and done rent to rent first? He then stayed in your property for a retreat. How did that conversation even come about, by the way? How did he know to go and stay in your Peak District place? Did you talk to him whilst you was at the dentist?
I was in the waiting room and I'm quite a chatty person. So I was chatting to all the people in the waiting room and I was showing them the pictures. I was like, I've got a little holiday cottage in the Peak District and people go and stay. La, la, la. And then he came back, he went, what are you doing? Because he's known me for a long time. I was like, my little cottage just gone live. How cute. And he's like, oh my God, I'd love to go there. Can we actually go? I was like, yeah. But my dentist was impressed that I was being educated by a CPD accredited training company. And that's what really got him on board, that he wasn't just with me. I was backed by these multimillionaires that were doing it, that were coaching me, got the training, and I'd started to do something. But I wouldn't change a thing because the lessons that I learned early on, and I've failed, I've bought properties that I've quickly had to sell on. You know, I've done so many failures in property. I should write a book about that actually. But all the lessons lead you up to the fact I've failed on my first 100 grand property. It means I'm not going to fail on this piece of land that I'm buying for 1.4 million, or do you know? So I wouldn't change a thing.
So I suppose that's probably quite a good point. What would you say is some of the biggest, lessons that you've learned through doing this? Like, what are some of the big mistakes that hopefully people could dodge along the route?
Don't fall in love with a property. I bought some property that I fell in love with. That's like your little chocolate box, cute property, but it's very, very difficult to refurb when you've got a conservation officer, unhappy, and you've got to, So not fall in love with a property, just work your numbers and stick to your numbers. 9 times out of 10, you work your numbers, the property's going to work. And yes, you need to get the builder to do what he's doing. You need to come in on time, on budget, but 95, it works. And whenever I failed, it's because I've gone off and I've decided I'm going to do it my own way, or I've not followed the right process because I've fallen in love with a property, or I really, really want to work with this investor that turns out not to be the best investor to work with. So I would say it's black and white property. Stick to your numbers and you will do it well.
And I suppose when you're getting investors on board, what sort of return, so people listening, if they're thinking of doing that, what sort of return do you give to that investor, and how do you go about making it attractive for them?
So there's a few different ways I work with investors. The first way is just a fixed return, take their money for 12 months, secured against the asset, and I give from 6 to 10%, depending on what I'm doing, and if they're funding the refurb as well. The second way I work with investors is I do what's called one for me, one for you. So they give me a pot of money, I do a buy, refurb, refinance for me, buy, refurb, refinance for them. They get their money back. I've got a property. They've got a property. Or sometimes with some of my investors, I've opened SPVs with them and we've done the big project together. They've put the money in. I've got all my knowledge and I know what I'm doing and all my contacts, and we've done the deal together. So it's just figuring out what your investor wants.
Okay, that's interesting. And have you ever failed on that? The thing is, that's what I would be worried about is, someone goes, right, I'm going to go do this. I've got this property. The property's good value. I need X amount of money. And then it comes in over budget. Cost of materials have gone up from the builder's side, things like that. And there's not that money there. Have you ever had it in those situations where you've had some damaging relations and things like that?
No, the number one thing that I train my students is that investor gets paid back. So you have to have plan B. So in the contract, it's written, if I go over my 12 months, they get more interest from me, but I have to pay it back at the at the 16-month point, all the money goes back. And you can do creative stuff in property. Like you can take the investor off, refinance it with a bridge. I've had to, I lent 200,000 from an investor once, bought a property, and I was so stupid because I cut my corners. My builder didn't go and see it. And then when my builder did see it, he's like, Jesus Christ, this is not going to be worth what you want it to be. I was like, why? He's like, this is a really complicated refurb, Abby. It's next to a train line. You're going to have to shut the train line. The stuff you need to do with it, the way the house is. And I didn't know any of this. So it was me being stupid. So I didn't go through that deal. All I did was sell the property on, and the investor still got paid back. Number one rule, you have to pay your investor back or else your credibility is gone. So you figure it out. There's been times where I've had to put 10, 20 grand into the deal to pay the investor back, but I don't see that as a bad thing. As long as you do your numbers and you've got that 25% profit, you're fine if you go over slightly or if the build goes over slightly. And it's who you're working with. My investors understand property. They know property and people aren't straightforward, that nothing ever goes to plan, nothing ever goes on time or on budget. But they're good, reasonable people. So as long as they get compensation, they're happy. And a lot of my investors that I had that invested with me 5 years ago, I've still got. And they ring me and go, don't give me back my money, keep it for another year. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to spend it on, but okay.
Yeah.
I better get another property.
That's a good, obviously you built that good relationship with them and it makes complete sense. I suppose I think it's super cool what you've achieved, and hats off to you. I think it shows people that you can do it from the ground up. I think the actual interesting side of things probably is where you said that you take investors' money and you'll do one for the investor, one for yourself. And I suppose that looks quite attractive because it's quite clean cut down the middle of what's to be expected. But are you saying that when they lend you that money, that you have enough money to basically purchase and refurb both properties? You do?
Yeah, 100%. So when I'm doing that, I will aim for 250, 300,000 pound properties in Yorkshire, which will rent really well. So they're not like the bottom end of the market, they're mid-high end of the market, they're going to get professional tenants. So the investor normally will lend me 600,000. I'll go and find, and it's how you buy them. So I can buy below market value. So I buy them at 70, 80 grand discount anyway. Then I go in with my builder, add the value. Then we can put the mortgages on, one in their company, one in my company, and pull out all the cash, and the investor gets their money back.
And I suppose from your perspective, how are you looking at a property and going, right, if I refurb this, it's going to be worth X? How are you doing that?
So I got trained like Rick's valuers get trained. So Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, they're the ones that the banks send out to mortgage. I'm trained like that. So I can look at a property, do the due diligence, and I can say within a couple of grand, I've been out 2 grand before, which I was really mad. I'm sure it was that valuer, but I can get it on the head what it's going to be valued for. It's the knowledge again, isn't it? It's when you know what you know.
There's Rick's value. Yeah, no, impressive. And from that perspective, do you, with all of the, obviously you said you've got your passive income and things like that, but aren't you finding now you've hit a point now where you're going to start struggling refinancing?
No, because I'm set up in LLPs and limiteds. And I've got a couple of banks now that will give me funds. So they'll give me an unlimited amount of, they'll say, well, you can buy 3 million worth of buy-to-lets and you just come and tell us, and the mortgage is just rubber stamped through. But when you get to a certain point in property, because you've got the track record, you've got the assets behind you, the banks want to work with you, and they will help you as you grow. But again, it's about going into your bank, talking to them. My bankers know my vision. They know what I want to do to help the UK housing crisis. They know how many commercials I want, how much off plan, because I'm supporting developers, getting their off plan sold in city centres. So they know what I'm doing. So they then will create and help me with the finance product. Yeah.
And that's not a small task to be able to do that. I mean, no. Being able to go, yeah. I think that is so much easier, like you're saying, where you're based, than if you was to try to do that down this way. I think people would struggle. I suppose that's why investing up north is ultimately more attractive, isn't it? The likes of, Yorkshire, Manchester, Birmingham, I think even like places like, I think Norfolk, they're not doing too bad, are they, on property valuations? But the growth is up there. I suppose even Scotland, Glasgow,
If
places
you're
like.
holding, you want to be in the north. That being said, I've got students that are doing flips in London. So they're buying one bed apartments in London, turning it into two and making 150 grand. I've got students that are buying really good commercials in London. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It means that there's a certain strategy for area. Holding is definitely north. There is no point to hold in London because the interest rate, the property price, the rent doesn't even cover your mortgage. So there's no point doing that in London. However, HMOs in London work very well, where you buy a house and rent the rooms out, flipping in London. I've just got a student that's just sold one, actually. She made 130 something grand from just adding a bedroom. Now, adding a bedroom isn't a big deal. Stud wall, some electrics and stuff. It's very easy to do, yet you make a lot of money by that one extra bedroom. So
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's just literally having an additional bedroom. They've gone and achieved that. Yeah, that's so awesome. I think hats off to you. I suppose we've already done 40 minutes. That's pretty crazy. Conversation's just been flying. Really easy to talk to. And I feel like people can take away quite a lot from this call from property.
yeah.
Is there any sort of like last notes that you want to finish on that you would like to let everybody know?
Probably the big thing from me is, and I say this quite a bit, is you can live your life like 99% of people do. Go to, get educated, go get a job, work up the career ladder, pay off your mortgage, pay into your pension, try and save some money, and then work all your life. I want to talk to the people that want to be part of the 1%, want to be the exception, because you can change your life. That doesn't have to be your life. You can come and do different things. It's just figuring it out how you're going to get the money. Best thing ever happened to me is when I stepped out of that 99% of people and I went towards what the 1% do. And now I get to live a great life and get to put my kids through private school and do amazing things that a single mum in debt would never thought she'd be able to do. So the message from me is anybody can do it, but you have to make that decision to want to.
Amazing. And if these guys want to come and follow you on your journey, what's the best sort of social media channels to follow you on?
So my name's Abi Hookway. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all of them really. Just come and Google my name and find me.
Okay, okay. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Abby. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.